Welcome everyone to Shakti Rise and Create panel talk. The topic today is experience of South Asians in technology and sales career in the US. Why this topic? Sales, especially in the tech sector, is not yet known for a very diverse workforce, though we are slowly getting there. And today we've got two very accomplished technology and sales leaders who are here to share their experiences with us. Ajit Shivadasan and Sri Lakshmi G. They have a South Asian background and they've charted an illustrious career in the US. Ajit is the global head of online, digital, and platform business at Lenovo. And he has grown that team from its infancy to a current state of having sales across 35 plus countries. Sri Lakshmi is a senior sales lead at Accenture and has been working in the US for the last couple of years. Welcome, Ajit and Sri Lakshmi, to this panel talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
So, Ajit, you lead a big team at Lenovo. What has been your experience in climbing the ranks as a person of South Asian origin in a foreign country? Did that matter at all, where you felt that you had to work harder to prove yourself? Or did you feel that there was some sort of unconscious bias as you were coming up?
No, so I've been here since 95, so that's what, 25 years, something like that. No, quite frankly, I think that there is definitely a sense of race and other things that come into play. But my experience, when I was with Deloitte, then I was worked for Gateway, and then obviously last 15 years I've been with Lenovo. Tell you the truth, I have not experienced explicit bias. I mean, I can't tell you that I have, but I have seen that other people have been affected by things like that. And there is certainly a case to be made that it exists at the workplace.
Okay. And, when you say you've seen such a case at other places, can you give an example, or is it very rampant, or it's more like one-off that happens once in a while?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing that I've seen, surprisingly, is not that people are discriminating on, with an agenda. The discrimination happens because of circumstances and because of stereotypes. And so, when people say that there is discrimination, I'm sure there are companies where these things are pretty bad. And, and I work for a Chinese company, which is, came from China, right? So if you talk about biases, right, that's like the ultimate bias that you can think of. But the reality is, it's really circumstances, and it's how people perceive certain things and their own kind of expectations that actually lead to some of these problems. Like, as an example, things lately have been different for Indian people. I mean, people are much more vocal. I mean, the Indians that a lot of them are very vocal, and then there is a whole bunch of people who are not very vocal. So the stereotype typically is that people are very quiet, right? They don't talk too much. And so if you really start applying some of these stereotypes for individuals, right, you can easily subconsciously start thinking that this person may not be right for a job that might require you to be in somebody's face and throw around the cuss word or whatever it is that they do to get their people motivated or otherwise, right? So sometimes people have this notion that certain types of people, and by the way, it goes against women quite a bit, quite frankly, where they think that the person will not be able to stand up to somebody, right? So I think more than people actually trying to discriminate, I think the circumstances and the stereotypes go in a significant way against people. I feel that's what I've experienced.
Okay, that makes sense. Sri Lakshmi, how has your experience been? Have you felt that you have to work harder, or for the same question, how has your experience been?
Yeah, so I'll add to Ajit's points, right? So I haven't personally faced any discrimination so far, fortunately, but at the same time, the sense of that unconscious bias, I think that definitely exists. And there is a lot of, factors that are because of the way we are, because of the way we are brought up, like that upbringing brings in some factors like, we have to respect elders. So that sometimes get perceived as being submissive, being passive. We are not expressing our voice in front of a group of senior folks. So that sometimes, shows up. But the thing is, over a period of years, like we all, I mean, at least in my career journey, I have made sure that mindfully and intentionally I'm addressing those things. So it's not that we are not, we shouldn't be in a position that we're just listening and we're just coming across as submissive people. We should be able to make our voices heard. And that takes some effort. And I think I made it very conscious. I made a very conscious effort to do that in my career. And that actually helps because, knowingly or unknowingly, like all of us have a lot of grit, right? I mean, when I say grit, like the passion and perseverance, I think it's very much in all of us. Maybe because of the way that we are brought up, like we have a very competitive education system back in India, right? So I think that gives us a lot of grit as we grow up, and that's inside us. The challenge is we should make a conscious effort to make sure we are perceived that way also. So that perception, that has to come in a very conscious way. That's something that I think all of us have to be conscious as we go through career ladder.
Okay, that's a very interesting point. So basically, Ajit talked about stereotypes, and you were also saying that that sometimes plays into how perceptions are made and how that can affect your progress in career. So there are two aspects to it. One, the person, who perhaps adheres to these stereotypes, they should be aware. That person should be aware that, hey, these stereotypes are working against me. And the other part of the coin is the leadership or whoever is in the upper echelons of the company should also be aware that, hey, these stereotypes don't necessarily translate to truth. We need to encourage people to look beyond stereotypes and overcome unconscious bias. Ajit, question to you. So for these two sets of parties, the one who is affected because the stereotype is there and the leadership, how have you seen things evolving in companies? What advice would you give to a person who is at this juncture when they're not quite sure if stereotypes are working against them?
I always tell people that self-perception is really important if you really want to be successful anywhere, right? You have to have a sense of self-perception of your strengths and your weaknesses and be honest about it. And you can make a decision as to how you want to proceed after you perceive yourself. Some people, like as an example, I am extremely non-political. I really have zero interest in furthering my career at all costs. I just don't care. I actually like what I do, and that, I'm passionate about what I do. So I'm not so worried about climbing the ladder, and I don't do anything that is, out of my way to go say that, hey, I got to get promoted, otherwise the world is going to come to an end. But I make that choice very consciously, because then I try to be at peace. I don't have to worry about comparing myself to somebody else and all this other stuff. But when you're younger, and when you're starting your career in your 30s and in your 20s, people have a very different perspective, right? They're always very competitive. They're always worried about how many people work for them. They want to make more money, blah, 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 right? So as you're going through the career, I tell people that, look, first of all, find a good mentor, somebody who will honestly tell you that you're full of bullshit and to your face, so that you know where you stand. Somebody that you respect, but can call your bullshit. And so I think finding a few people like that, preferably away from work and somebody at work who can actually keep you honest, is important. And then you manage your self-perception with the feedback. And I think you come out trying to figure out how to navigate the waters a little bit better. Because the reality is, you have to be good at what you do, but also how you get perceived makes a big difference in terms of, are you collaborative? Do you have a track record of delivering things? Do you overcommit and underdeliver? So I think people over a period of time form opinions about you, and it's really, really important for you to understand through feedback where you stand, right? And sometimes you have blind spots, and the best way to get rid of blind spots is to actually shine a bright light, hopefully through the lens of somebody around you that you trust and respect. So that's what I think helps, right? For people to really kind of have that self-awareness.
That makes sense. Sri Lakshmi, do you do something similar, or how has your experience been?
Yeah, I think, related to the earlier point also, right? The truth is the missing link between the actual merit and your growth is actually that executive presence, or how we are perceived by people, and what kind of impact we are able to make in front of a larger group or a senior leadership, right? So for that, I often do skip level meetings, which was very difficult in the earlier periods, right? So skip level meetings, like mentor discussions, because I have fortunately I've been able to find good mentors, at least 2 or 3 across genders. Like I have a couple of male mentors and a couple of female mentors as well. So what I do is, like, I kind of do an introspection in front of them. Like, as Ajit was mentioning, I also feel the first step is self-awareness. So the moment you realize what you're lacking, that's the first step towards making yourself visible, right? Making yourself heard. So for that, the best option is to talk openly. Like, tell someone that what is your ambition, like what do you want to do in life, and then that kind of gives us a clear path towards, like, what am I spending my time on the right stuff, right? Because we all are, I think most of us are, like, very hardworking, and we want to succeed in life, whether it is for some people it may be a career growth, for some people it may be something else, right? It's not always climbing the ladder, or climbing the corporate gym. It's more like we want to make sure we are happy, we want to make sure that what we need in life, and based on that, having somebody who has seen our type of career and who can listen to us and give us correct feedback is very important. And I prefer to do that use through these skip level meetings, because that sometimes help, because they don't get into the tactical stuff in those cases, right? They don't get into our day-to-day operations, or all those, but instead some of the strategic stuff that we often don't focus on, or we wouldn't get enough time in our day-to-day life to think about them. So suddenly we put a full stop and we start retrospecting, like, am I spending time on the right stuff? Should I be looking on something else? All those comes through in those aspects.
So importance of mentors, self introspection, very important. So thanks for sharing that. Sri Lakshmi, I know that you believe that the way women approach sales can be different from the typical perception around sales, which is being very alpha and very dominating. So today, as you hear about the importance of or the effect of stereotypes, or how you're perceived, have you felt that to be an impediment? That women are not seen as very dominating, or very assertive, and you believe that may not be the only way to do sales. So what would you say to that?
I think when I started my career in sales, at that time, definitely, like, I myself had that stereotype, like sales is all about that slick males, talking through tricks to make money, kind of, right? I don't think it's true though, but then that's a stereotype that exists across. And women, when they come to this kind of a role, will they be able to do that? Will they be able to talk through skillfully? Will they be able to present ideas skillfully? That's definitely a doubt that most people have, even in today's world. But I would approach that question differently, Lakshmi. I believe, like, each of us have our own strengths, right? I mean, as females, we have our own strengths. Like, we can connect with people more than we talk to people. So, when 2 people are talking, the way we connect with them might be completely different. And I have experienced that personally. And some people feel very comfortable when a woman is selling them something, because they feel that, we have done enough research and we have gathered enough knowledge before we started talking to them, right? So that kind of, I mean, I have come across at least 3 or 4 cases in the last 1 year itself, right? So that gives us a lot of confidence that sales is not only about that agro image. It's more of consultative discussions, understanding problems, bringing in the right solutions, etc. And I wanted to make sure something. When I say aggression is not something that's very much required, assertion is very important. Being assertive is definitely important, whether you are a male or female in sales. That's important because you are trying to be assertive in an ambiguous environment, trying to explain a solution to somebody who is in a situation, right? So that's definitely important, though.
Okay, that's helpful. So Arjit, reflecting on that same point, as the leader of a team, of a huge sales team, do you see a marked difference in the way women approach sales, especially in the technology sector versus men? The outcome may be similar, but and both may be equally successful. Do you notice that difference, or if you do, how do you approach that?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is, rather than comparing men to women, which is kind of, I think, the biggest mistake people make, I think the way to think about this is to say, what are the characteristics that you see in a successful salesperson, right? And to me, when I think about all the salespeople over the years that I've known, and I've known quite a few, the successful ones, male or female, have very similar characteristics. And the most important characteristics that these folks have is one, they are extremely collaborative. Two, they are inspiring. Three, when they talk, people listen because they always say something of substance, right? So they have credibility and track record. So ultimately, you kind of reverse engineer that and you say, success actually follows from years of building credibility. You have sales numbers, you meet them consistently. You don't give bullshit answers. You don't try to give excuses. You basically fall on your sword if it's your mistake. You don't try to come up with something and start making stories and start throwing your people under the bus. So there are all these things that make for everybody, a successful whatever. It doesn't matter whether it's sales or non-sales, but those factors matter. So I've seen really terrible salespeople who are women, and I've seen really, really terrible salespeople who are men. And they invariably have very similar characteristics, believe it or not, right? They tend to be overly upset when numbers are bad, and they can get overly emotional when things are good. And so I think the key is to really understand what is needed. If you are going to pursue a sales career, what do you actually need? And to me, the one or two things that I think are really important are, you actually need to have the ability to think very clearly, whether you are a man, woman, whoever, because a lot of it is about strategy. And if you are going to be a successful salesperson, you should have the ability to really, really think strategically. Second, you live and die by numbers. You have to really be good at numbers. And by that, I don't mean you need to do higher order differential calculus, but your ability to actually look at the data and really being able to understand how to make the decisions and how to actually help your teams get to the outcomes that they want. Oftentimes, I've got 600, 700 people working for me, and some of the bigger sales organizations have thousands of people working for it. The leader himself is not doing all the work. His ability to actually direct the team is based on looking at all the data and then being able to direct them to where they need to go. So to me, when I look at all these successful people in sales, doesn't matter, men, women, they are all successful because of those characteristics and how they are able to do that well. Now, the culture in a company is really important. And some cultures can be toxic. So there, if the culture is toxic and it's not inclusive, then I'll tell you that maybe minority or women and other people have a disadvantage. So I think it's really, you cannot discount the impact of culture. And so if it's a toxic culture, I think that some of the people who probably are not going to be as assertive as you were kind of talking about, and as Sri was talking about, they may not thrive in that environment, right? So therefore, I also tell people that, look, you have to worry about whether the environment is right for you. And I always tell, look, if the environment is not fit for you, head for the exit, because you're never going to be successful.
Makes sense. So definitely it's the characteristics, and that was very insightful, how the characteristics that you mentioned right now, it's applicable across a wide range of spheres or disciplines. It's just not sales. And it's good to know that, hey, the qualities that help serve you in one discipline will serve you very well in another discipline as well. Obviously, domain knowledge is required. Ajit, you said you've been working in the US, from 1995, since 1995. So how have you observed the corporate environment changing in terms of giving opportunities to minorities or ensuring that they are given the right representation? I'm sure things were very different, maybe 2 decades back versus what it is today.
Yeah, I mean that's how I started this conversation. I think that now corporate metrics include women in leadership, minorities in leadership. I have a metric for the percentage of my organization that's women, function by function. Number of people in my leadership team that are women executives. Overall, as a company, we have a target for what percentage of women should be executives. So I think none of these conversations, these conversations have started maybe in the last 10 years, much more actively. And in the last couple of years, they've become much more front and center. And that makes a big difference because we have a very rigorous organizational process, right? Every year we spend something like 2 months and we go through a very elaborate planning process, succession, talent, high potentials, who are our next set of leaders. We think about cross-functional, cross-organizational movement for people. So we do this for the entire company. So we have 50,000 people. Everybody goes through what we call a OHRP process. So that process itself now starts looking at these types of issues and metrics. And so everybody has to talk about it, right? So you can't hide. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I think we seldom really talked about it. There was never a question of equality, pay equality. That is never even talked about. So now there is more and more conversation about people's pay. And if you are hiring somebody, you cannot ask them how much money they make, as an example. So some of those things are definite changes and shift that I've seen, at least, and it's accelerating.
That's very endearing to know. And do you think this is happening in a handful of these bigger companies, or do you see this happening across the industry, irrespective of the size of the organization?
Yeah, I think it's happening across the industries, across the companies. And I think the obviously the big tech and some of the bigger companies are leading the way, but they also wield enormous amount of public opinion and power. So, people like Amazon and Google and Facebook, Facebook as an example, these are companies that shape public opinion. And so when they lead, other people have to listen.
Okay. So Sri Lakshmi, do you have you felt that it was different, when you came to the US, or you came more recently? So how has your experience been in terms of getting that positive effect of diversity discussions and bringing up minority talent?
Yeah, I moved to US in 2015, so it was not long back ago, like Ajit. But at the same time, like I think in the technology space, like there is an increasing push towards bringing in diversity, right? But in our groups alone, like individual groups also, there is a lot of focus, and I spearhead some of the women initiatives where we make sure that each individual is looking beyond their own small cubicle, right? Looking at other women in the organization, because sometimes leaders, see, there is a recent survey that says, like, from the leadership, they all think the organization is very much encouraging diversity, but at the same time, the entry level folks or the middle level management may still have a lot of barriers which is preventing them from getting to the executive level. So we are trying to make sure people are connecting with the larger group, with executive women, so that they have their own perceptions. Like one thing I have seen is, even though there is a lot of push from the leadership, women sometimes feel that this may be a barrier for her personal life, right? So sometimes they feel that this may not be the right choice, and they don't get confident that this is something that they can do in their career. So for such cases, one thing that I have seen as very helpful is, we arrange very intimate conversations with other women executives where we get into groups and we kind of do a journey line. We call it as journey line, where we share stories from senior women executives and say that, this is something that's possible for all of you. You don't have to be afraid of taking that step, speaking to senior leaders and making sure that you're getting there, right? Only if you get that confidence within yourself, all these initiatives that corporates are taking will come to fruition. So these kind of initiatives are, the other angle where we are trying to make sure that women are aware and women are feeling more confident, and that brings in more trust and, all those follow-up action items.
Yeah, so Deepa had a question on inclusion versus diversity. So let me just kind of answer that question quickly. So diversity is how diverse is your workforce. Inclusion is your forward-looking thinking on what type of people you want to include in your organization. So I think the change that has happened is now we have, as an example, in Lenovo, we have a percentage for types of people that we want to include. The tricky part in all of this is nobody really knows what is the right percentages, quite frankly. Like, I mean, how do you decide whether your organization should have 70% women or 50% women? So some of it is kind of tricky, but as a start, one of the things that is interesting for us is to start listening to people and get feedback from our own employees in terms of what their perception about inclusion is. So whether it is LGBT, or it's Black Americans, or it's women, and now it's actually millennials in the workforce, all of these categories, and veterans as an example, all of these categories, my view is that the dialogue has to be internal first. And people who are in the company have to provide a point of view. External benchmarks on, there's enough studies going on from Harvard Business Review to everybody else who kind of provides benchmark for what is acceptable, what should be acceptable, and how you should approach this. But I think there is still a question, to be fair, to Deepa's question, as to what the right benchmarks are. And I think that the jury is out in terms of what that should be.
Okay. I have a question from one of the audience here, Raji. So she asks, what are the major impact or fundamental shifts you see the way sales is being done because of the recent pandemic and the way people have started working?
Shri, you want to take this first?
Yeah, I can take that. So I think this has kind of changed the face-to-face impact, right? So as salespeople, we all are so used to meeting clients on a day-to-day basis, hearing what they're going through, coming up with the right solution. So that face-to-face feel is no longer there. So I think even then we make sure that we connect with them very often. So from our connect perspective or our conversation standpoint, we still go by just that it's all virtual, and we have all the tools that support our virtual conversations, and we have virtual workshops, all those things, right? So there are a lot of virtual tools that support all these activities. Now, from a strategic standpoint also, I think the solutions that we sell, that has been impacted a lot by the COVID or pandemic situations, because the way or the kind of solutions or kind of situations that clients are facing are very important pre-COVID and post-COVID. It's like a digital transformation accelerator, right? So in the technology world, especially like I sell most of the more of services than products. So in the post-COVID world, it's like, digital transformation has been accelerated like by multiple years. So whatever we used to push clients to think about in early 2020, right now they all are like must-have items for clients. So our portfolio of service offerings itself have changed a lot considering the situations that clients are going through.
Yeah, so let me just give a slightly different flavor in terms of change. I mean, in terms of work, nothing has changed. I mean, I used to spend, on an average year, I spend about 300,000 to 400,000 miles in the air. So I'm gone most of the time, right? 50 to 70% of the time, I'm actually traveling somewhere in the world. So since January, February, I haven't traveled anywhere, right? So I've basically been sitting at home. But sales are fine. Our sales are actually up 50%. And now obviously I run online, so everybody's moving online. So some of it is because of the way the world is changing.
For you, it's actually good then,
It is.
right? Yeah.
Well, I sell computers and I sell online, so it's the perfect combination, right?
Yeah.
But regardless, the thing that I think really affects some of these things, and I think that if this were to be a more protracted event, then the issue is going to be relationships, especially in a sales culture where things can be really, really hard. When the numbers are not being met and when there is so much pressure and you have to grow the business at a very aggressive clip, the way you manage that is you have a very aggressive business management system. But then the reason I spend 300,000, 400,000 miles is to actually meet these people, the same people that work for me, and have them interact with me in a setting outside of work, right? Have a dinner, have a few drinks, talk to them one-on-one, be in the office, spend time with them. So they understand you as a person and where you're coming from. It's really, really important that people understand who you are as a leader and you understand them as an employee, because then you can actually dial up the rhetoric up and down depending on how the numbers are, and people are less likely to misunderstand you. That's what's missing in this equation. And it's even more difficult when you're talking about clients, because it's very easy for you to have a Zoom call, but you never will read what actually happens after the Zoom call, which is probably more important as to how they're thinking about what you just said. Like as an example, I am going through a consulting engagement, multi-million-dollar consulting engagement right now. And I've never met these guys other than being on a Zoom call with them pretty often, right? But they have no idea how I operate, what I am as a person. So I think that's the biggest thing, both employees with each other, that sense of community, and sales leaders, their ability to actually connect with people. I think that's very important, and that's what they're missing.
Ajit, that's very interesting. And you said you do 300K to 400K miles per year. You used to do that. But then once things go back to normal, do you think you will travel as much, or will it be a fraction? Because you know that a lot of this travel probably can be avoided because of the way things are done now.
Well, I would trade not traveling, because I actually am at a point where I've done this for such a long time that I actually hate traveling, especially for work, because it's grueling and you don't sleep well, right? So it's not very healthy to travel that much. But the reality is, and I am definitely going to try and figure out how to cut down on my travel. But for the reasons I just said, there is a huge attrition when it comes to tech people, right? I mean, our attrition is very high and people are changing all the time. So if you don't travel as much and you don't get an opportunity to be in front of people, a lot of people have stayed back. I have a very tenured team, right? Many of the people, more than 50% of the organization has been with me for more than 10 years. That is just remarkable for a tech business, right? I mean, nobody stays that long. So the reason people stay is because you are able to inspire them, you're able to meet with them, you have a connection with them. And when they have an offer in hand from somebody else, you pick up the phone and talk to the person, and you instill confidence in them to stay with the company, right? Because they believe in you. So that, I think, is going to be still important. And so I do expect travel to be cut down a little bit, but I don't see a scenario where it's going to be complete. It'll never be zero. Never, it cannot. It just simply won't happen.
Of course. Ajit and Sri Lakshmi, this has been a very insightful discussion. We talked about self-perception. How do we ensure that we build credibility, and the common characteristics which make a successful salesperson. We learned a lot about how things have been changing in the industry for the better. And it's been very informative, very illuminating for everybody who's listened to this. So thank you for sharing your perspectives, and thank you for sparing this time with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the opportunity, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you, Lakshmi. It was a very relevant topic, actually. And thank you, Ajit and Deepa, Raji.
Nice meeting all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Deepa.